Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third official episode of the Black Rose Gaming Dungeons and Dragons discussion. I'm the host and GM Mikado. You can call me Mick. Let's do a quick roll call before we get started. Animus, are you there?
I'm here.
Balasar, are you there?
Yep.
Tabby, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, excellent. Tonight we're going to be talking about shenanigans, which, Animus, I'm looking directly at you when I say that. And the basic definition that I mean by shenanigans is players making incredibly poor choices that are bound to be entertaining. The problem with that, of course, as I'm sure you can probably guess, is that if players do start making more and more radical decisions as a game goes, then after a certain point, everything's going to spiral out of control. And it's very important to figure out a way to keep it relevant to the story or otherwise to keep it, well, from spiraling out of control. And once again, I'm looking directly at you, Animus. So many shenanigans.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you totally didn't let death touch your brain or anything like
Not
that.
at all.
No, not at all.
Didn't blow up an Alliance cruiser either.
That destroyed about a quarter of a planet. No, not at all. So, shenanigans, as I'm sure you can imagine, are very entertaining. And they can also take a story into a completely different direction than what you've planned as the GM. Very tightly planned. But they can also be a problem to the storytelling. However, at the same time, it's very important to not, for lack of a better word, try and corral your players into playing just the way you want them to. What do you guys think about that? What do you think, Animus? I know that you love doing shenanigans, but do you ever try and rein them in so that it doesn't just completely spiral out of control?
I do. I do try to keep the things I pull to limits of how many of the other players is it going to affect if this backfires in my face? And B, whether I succeed or fail, does it push the story forward?
What about you, Balasar?
I mean, if it's not like Animus said, if it's not gonna backfire, I say do it to make sure it's funny as hell.
I think you know, Balasar, that Animus has done it when he knows it's going to backfire. Spectacularly.
Yeah.
What about
Some
you,
of the
Animus? You were saying something?
I was about to say sometimes when I pull shenanigans, it's specifically because I know it's going to backfire on me specifically.
As opposed to everybody.
Right. The question I ask myself isn't what are the odds of this backfiring? It's what are the odds of this backfiring and taking more than just my character out with it?
What about you, Tabby?
Well, it's
Hello?
as a player, as someone who's never. It's always been like a sign of a good GM if they can take a shenanigan, which could normally ruin the game, and spin it to where there's not just a salvageable game, but it's still enjoyable for all parties.
Well, I do think there is an important distinction to make between a player that wants shenanigans and a player who's just trying to troll things. Because I've played with people that just want to be a troll. There was in particular a Star Wars game where one of the players had a custom-made race, and part of the point of the custom-made race is that they have basically a familiar, but the familiar has a connection to them through the Force, which means that the familiar is technically a part of their soul. So they know what the other thing is thinking, they can communicate telepathically. It gave him an advantage on initiative rolls because the creature could act as kind of like a scout and could tell us that something was coming before we knew about it. And this other player kept trying to play with the thing because it was kind of like a cross between a dragon and a dog. And the guy whose familiar it was kept telling him like, "Dude, don't do that. You're throwing force lightning at my, dragon familiar, and it doesn't like that." And the player kept saying, "No, dude, it's totally fine. He knows it's he knows I'm just playing with him." Like, no, you don't. And that same player kept trying to force my character into doing a quote unquote friendly duel, and just really bad decisions that probably would have been entertaining, but just it was just bad. It was just bad.
Well,
Now,
yeah, and there's a difference between, a troll player and then somebody who maybe can kind of see where the story's going and purposely takes a sidetrack just because,
it'll be more
not to
interesting.
troll, but just sort of to flesh everything out and like, hey, this
Or because it'll be interesting.
going, but this might be a good um detour.
Yeah.
Or it could be funny as hell.
Or it could be funny as hell. I do think it's also important to at least try and keep things story relevant. I mean, Animus, Belisar, you guys have both played with me for a while. You know how, I don't want to say strict because I'm not necessarily strict about it, but I like to try and keep things contained to the story that we're in. I like to try and not have too much going on at once. And shenanigans can be interesting, but if it starts to go off into its own direction, it can be difficult.
Yeah.
Which is why I allow certain things like your character wanting to let death touch his brain, because it still had the potential to move the story forward, and it wasn't a just complete 180. Like in a different Game of Thrones campaign, there was a character that had decided to squat in the ruined tower that my character as a noble had just purchased and was trying to establish as his, his home, his actual manor. And no matter what I did, no matter what offers I made to the character, the player was just like, "Nope, I'm just gonna keep squatting here, and you can't get rid of me unless you kill me. Nope, I'm not gonna let you guys have the place. Nope, you can't stop me. Ha ha ha." And it was just very annoying. It was extremely frustrating, and it also wasted, I think, 2 sessions.
Yeah.
Have you ever run into people doing that, Tabby?
Not really, because anytime I've been in a game where even if the GM thinks that might be happening, aside and talk to them, and maybe we might be short a player the next time, or maybe there'll be a reason as to why the character was acting like a dick.
There was a reason why that character was acting like a dick. The character was a dick, and the player kind of was too. But still, shenanigans can be a very enjoyable part of D&D, I find. They really can, but it's a balance. It's all about the balance. It really is. What about you, Belisar? You've played a couple other things, right? You've played with
Right.
1 or 2 other people. Have you encountered that before?
Some people I've encountered at least, or at least played with someone who took the whole game way too serious, and then they had a friend or a family member that joined in that was way too into the shenanigans and took it way too far, and then seriously just kind of pissed on the whole game and ruined it.
Yeah, that's very disappointing. Very disappointing. Well, it does, however, nicely dovetail into 2 other topics that we have to discuss in either this episode or later episodes, which is playing characters of various alignments, or more to the point of what we've been discussing, talking about difficult players, which I think perhaps we should go ahead and dovetail into the more obvious one, especially for those who may be listening that are kind of new to D&D and trying to get a feel for it, and we can stop talking so much in, like, heavy use terms, for lack of a better word, and talk more to the people that may not know very much about D&D. Dealing with difficult players. Every group at some point is going to have a difficult player, and it's important to know how to deal with them. And if you are just another player, I cannot stress enough how important it is, even if you think the GM likes the person, even if you think it's not going to help, go ahead and say something. If you think somebody's being a douche, if you think they're being really difficult and just making it not fun, say something to the GM. D&D, it's like video games. It's like, movies or whatever else. It's supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be enjoying yourself. And if you're not enjoying yourself, then what the hell are you doing here?
Yeah.
I've dealt with more than a few difficult players myself. Not, honestly, very often as a GM, but I honestly haven't been a GM all that long. However, I've dealt with difficult players as another player, and that's basically the only ammo you have is to talk to the GM yourself and to talk to the other players. Tell them, hey, look, I hate to say it, but, this guy's making things difficult for me. I'm not having fun, whatever. How about you, Tabby? Have you dealt with a lot of difficult players in your time?
Yeah, like the one that I can come up with, the situation is we all got mutated somehow. And her character ended up with extra life. Mine needed life. Like, sort of like a vampire.
Right.
Needed to drain some type of life, and it was only like a small amount. Well, as a party, when we discovered, wait, you're extra strong. You have this extra amount. We'll just, this solves our problem. And the player was like, no, you're not doing that. Just being horrible. So, because it was something insignificant that wasn't going to affect the gameplay, the GM pulled me aside and said, just assume you're doing it.
All right.
Because her character's gonna rest and she's gonna regain it back. So she's not gonna know, but her dragging her heels and like, no, I'm not doing this, it's actually going to hold the entire party back for the rest of this adventure.
Yeah. How about you, Animus? I think you've played before joining the group that I'm in, right?
A little bit.
Did you deal with any difficult players back then? We've all dealt with difficult characters. That's entirely different. Those are usually called boss fights. But have you dealt with any difficult players?
Yeah, the difficult players I've played with have, honestly, the best way to put it is they had no interest in learning how to actually play.
I can see that.
So much as doing random crap.
I can definitely see that.
Like capturing a bunch of rats in a sack. Or skinning a dead horse. For no reason.
So as Animus and Balasar will both remember, unfortunately, I cannot take credit for having been present for this particular story, but it is one of my favorites as far as difficult players go. The Tragic Tale of Darth Fishhooks. So the Star Wars Dungeons & Dragons system, which actually is made by Wizards of the Coast, this particular system, I really, really enjoy it. It's great. But about a session or two before I had joined that particular campaign, there was a character whose plan was eventually to become a Sith Lord, but he was trying to go super, super realistic on how to build a character and equipment setup and everything, and everyone else was just kind of looking at him like, why the hell did you use your credits to buy ball bearings, fishing line, and metal hooks and all that? And he's like, no, I'm a stealth character. I've gotta, be able to make traps and all this. And then he tried to make a stealth roll against stormtroopers in an empty hallway. Which, for those of you that don't understand or that are new to Dungeons and Dragons, if there is nothing to hide behind, if there is nowhere to hide, you cannot make a stealth roll, because that's basically like just putting your hands in front of your face and saying you can't see me to the NPCs or monsters. It doesn't work. There's no way to make a stealth roll. And so he got spotted, and there was a fight that went through, of course. Later on, they were in another hallway that had nowhere to hide, except there was a broom closet, basically. He hides in the broom closet, and he sets up this elaborate trap within the broom closet after succeeding a stealth roll, which means nobody knows that he's in the broom closet, that involved making a person trip on the ball bearings and get caught in a bunch of fishing line and metal hooks. And when he told the GM about it, the GM told him, so what you're basically saying is if a stormtrooper that doesn't know that you're there decides to look for you in the closet that you're hiding in, he will then trip on the ball bearings and get caught on the metal hooks in his 1/4-inch thick laminate armor, which is blaster proof and can withstand attacks from Frick and Cortosis weapons, which for the uninitiated in Star Wars means very, very, very sharp and very strong. And the player said, yes, absolutely. And that is the tragic tale of Darth Fishhooks. He didn't last very long after that because he made very poor choices. Very poor choices. Shenanigans are a very good idea if they're done right. I cannot stress that enough. If it's done right, if it's not a burden on the other players, if it's not a burden on the GM, if it's done right, which there are a lot of fun shenanigans that can and do happen. I mean, there's like we talked about in the very first episode, there's the cockslap that echoed into history. Did we tell you that story, Tabby? Did I ever get a chance to tell you that?
No, I didn't hear it.
Well, we were doing the 5th edition starter campaign that comes with the starter box, and Balasar was
using my character.
Balasar was playing a Dragonborn. He was playing a Dragonborn, and we were fighting a group of goblins. We get down to the last goblin, and Balasar says, I want to do something weird. So immediately I got very suspicious. Like, what do you mean you want to do something weird? He says that he wants to do an attack against the goblin, and he doesn't want to use his sword. Okay. Sword, yes. Sorry. So he drops his pants, and with his erect dragonborn penis, he attacks the goblin. Rolls a natural 20, gets a critical hit. Rolls another natural 20 because it was that powerful, and actually kills it with a cock slap to the side of its head.
You got to mention the fact that I had a difficulty of 12.
Yes, a difficulty of 12, which in 5th edition is a very hard roll.
And my whole thing about that story is D&D goblins ain't that sexy.
I mean, hey, you never know. There's no accounting for fetishes.
It wasn't exactly erect. It was more of a softie.
That makes it worse.
That does kind of make it worse. Maybe we should start talking about that, Balasar. There might be children in the room.
I mean, it's the same setup as, the Darth Fishhooks. I was playing a thief once. We were in a museum, and was wanted or something, I don't remember, but they're like, hey, these guards might see you, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm a statue. Natural 20. Roll again. Natural 20. I was a statue.
That reminds me of
When
a
I
very...
left, they had that museum put out wanted posters for the thief that stole their thief statue.
Yeah.
I was the statue.
That does also remind me of a story that keeps showing up on Facebook about a D&D campaign where there's a druid that is trying to sneak through some kind of like enemy soldier camp, and he gets spotted, and so he tells the GM, oh shit, I turned into a tree. And this is a camp that's in the middle of a plain, middle of a set of plains. There are no trees. There's no brush, even. And the GM is like, are you sure you want to do this? The guy says, you know what? Yes, I am. Natural 20. The guards are walking by and they say, wait a minute. Why is there a tree? There wasn't a tree here earlier, was there? And the character accidentally says, yes, it totally was here earlier. And the GM says, you know what? Roll a bluff check. Natural 20. Well, you know what? I guess the tree would know better than we do. Shenanigans, ladies and gentlemen. They can be very enjoyable. It is, however, as always, important to make sure not to let them get out of hand. It's really not possible to stress that enough. If you feel like, and one of the things I forgot to mention earlier actually is that when shenanigans are a thing that you're allowing to go on and that you're in the midst of, it's important to try and not let it become its own storyline, unless it can involve the whole party. Because particularly with you, Animus, a lot of the shenanigans that you pull, as terrible as they are, as enjoyable as they are, a lot of them have a huge risk of ending up being your own personal storyline, which I would very much love to do. I would absolutely love to do a single-player campaign of that Maester in the Citadel after death touched his brain, when he starts seeing things and starts being able to do magic. But the rest of the party would be sitting there going, well, what the hell am I doing here? And so, like I said, it's important, always important, to make sure you keep things reined in to the right amount.
Yeah, it really is, and I'm aware that a number of the shenanigans that I pull do have a tendency to lean towards being very easy to spin off into their whole own thing. But I try to keep it such that it's also not hard to pull it back in and keep it from doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a fine line to walk, though.
It's a very fine line to walk. The other issue, I think, at least with our group, is that there seems to be something of an issue with people either wanting to use their imagination on how to play their characters or being able to. And I don't really know that it's just that they're not as imaginative as you or I, or Balasar for that matter. I'm not sure, honestly, but I mean, I've noticed a few times that I've given someone almost an open door to do something interesting with their character, and they've just
walked right past it.
Just walked right past it. Just walked straight past it, and it kind of hurts because there's other things I want to do with the storylines. There's scenes I want to create with these people and have them be involved, and before I even get into it, I worry that it won't happen because they won't see it.
And that could be, like, the first time I ever played any game, I was handed a Vampire the Masquerade character sheet and said, here's your dice. I knew nothing of the rules, the system, nothing. It was just, here's a character. And for the longest time, I held myself back. So I'm like, I don't know what I can do, what I can't do.
Which leads
And I like had to just learn by watching everybody. And so still now that's like how I come to any game is like, okay, somebody else run it. I'm gonna hang back, tell me when I need to attack, or tell me like get my attention because I'm observing instead of being active.
Which leads me to an excellent final point. Everybody out there, whether you're a veteran, whether you're a newbie, whether you've played every system there is, whether you've never even touched a multi-sided dice before, never be afraid of asking questions. Ever. If there's something you don't understand, if there's something you think doesn't make any sense, absolutely bring it up. An excellent example is with Game of Thrones because we've gone through I think 5 different ways now of figuring out how it works when a person takes damage because it started off with me taking my own understanding of a system that I've never had a chance to play before, and now there's 2 or 3 different players in addition to me that are reading up on how to do it, and we're evolving by the way that we understand it, and it's only changed because somebody else said, hey, wait a minute, Mick, what about this? Because this sounds different than what you said before. It's always important to ask questions. Never be afraid to ask. Never be afraid to admit that something that you don't understand something because that's the only way you'll end up growing. And like I said, if it's not fun, then what the hell are you doing here?
Well, that and like another reason why I held back was a lot of the people in my first few games were min-maxers.
Oh my god, I really
So
don't
on
like
top of
min-maxing.
not knowing the system, I had these people who knew the system like the back of their hand and were playing the rules in their own favor.
Yeah, I really don't like min-maxing. I mean, it works great when your character's doing the one thing they're designed for, but if they're ever expected to do anything else, then you're kind of stuck. You're trapped. You fail.
I mean, that's how everybody was. It was like, even if it was something that their character wasn't designed to do, somehow they still managed to do it because of perks or bonuses, or like, hey, I can't do this and you can sort of do this, so if we work together, maybe we can't. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on.
That sounds like a combination of exploitation and teamwork slash aid another, which is exploitation of a system is a very complicated topic that I will absolutely make a note of right now to do an entire episode on because that is a very complex topic that
Pixie
deserves-
bards.
Don't even start with that damn pixie bard. Oh my god. I will explain that to you after we end the episode, Tabby. But yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
min-maxing is a very delicate balance of acts to pull off.
That's because with min-maxing, there's so many different varieties, which is, like I said, that's why I'm going to do an entire episode of this show on just system exploitation. What people do, the different varieties, all of that. However, we are getting very close to 30 minutes, so for now, thank you for everybody that's come back for the 3rd episode. I know it's been kind of a long ride, just like every episode is. You know, we divulge into different topics. We rant, we rave, we go on tangents. Thank you for sticking it out to the end, though. As I've said before, the plan is to have about 1 episode up every week. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want. It's definitely appreciated. Share the videos out anywhere you want to. You know, and it's Dungeons and Dragons. Have fun with it. Any closing remarks?
Not for me.
Animus, Balasar, anything to add? I will take that as a no. So, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. See you next time.